Hello and welcome to the Make Money with Mace podcast. I'm your host Mace, and you can join me on this quick little NFL preview as I sweat out my best bet tonight. Need 3 more points from the Sixers and Pacers combined for the push. 3 minutes to go, so hopefully that actually hits. Would be great. Great for the vibes. But yeah. I don't really have a ton to talk. I've talked about all the 4 remaining teams quite a bit. So I would like to really talk about some specific matchups and what I think could really change these games up and be true impacts. There's some things that don't matter that are being pushed, like whatever Warren. Here's a good tip if you're listening. Warren Sharp is fake. Like, he's a coward. He's just not a good person. He presents players as dirty when they're not. He is like out to get their earning potential. It's bizarre. And he will engagement bait, knowing he's wrong. He's either very stupid or he's malicious. Neither's great. It'd be better if he was just incredibly dumb, but I don't think he is. He's just a very malicious person. So yeah, like, that's why, like, if you see like anything about referees or anything he says, like, don't pay attention to it. He's a nonsense human who doesn't really like deserve any attention he gets. But he's an aggregator. Like, he's just one of those types. He has no integrity, so we just sort of have to deal with him. But that's besides the point, because he mentioned stuff about referees in the AFC title game, which is the first thing I want to talk about, which I don't think will have any impact, because the thing about officials is that they don't work. Their crews do not work title games. It's like an all-star cast of officiating, where it's like the best officials who make the most accurate calls, that sort of thing, are the ones who work championship games. So we don't have to worry about nonsense. We just have to worry about ball. And anything else I'm just not interested in discussing. So with all that being said, we got to talk about the Ravens hosting the Kansas City Chiefs Sunday at 3 p.m. or 3:30. Is it 3 or 3:30? 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we get into this game with Baltimore as 3.5 point favorites, and Kansas City, obviously underdogs, road underdogs. The over-under is set at 44.5 or 45 at most places, which I kind of wholly agree with. Both these teams go under quite a bit. Their defense is quite good. And in terms of when it comes to teams that are very good, both of these teams are very, very good. You have to start looking for granular weaknesses and granular things that can be taken advantage of. So with that being said, I'd like to start with what Kansas City needs to do to win this game. And personally, I think it starts on the offensive side of the ball for them. So when you look at the Chiefs offense, and let's just say they're lining up in 11 personnel most of the time, 3 wide receiver with Travis Kelce, with Mahomes and Pacheco in the backfield, right? Occasionally they'll do 2 tight end personnel with Noah Gray. But let's just say for the most part they're lining up in their traditional 11 personnel, and we go from there. And the Ravens will likely be lining up in nickel for the most part. So there's a level of PFF where they say base, and they still have some like very antiquated lineups that show like the rotational players, but you will never see a 5-person front that is essentially 5 defensive linemen and 2 linebackers in today's NFL. So we're going to be acting as if they're a nickel, which we should, just because nickel is the most played defensive package in the NFL now. It is the new base. And just looking at this matchup, right, the first thing that really stands out for me is Donovan Smith and Jawan Taylor have been the two worst tackles in the NFL this year. And the reason why the Chiefs can get away with that is because their interior offensive line was, the best in the NFL, with Creed Humphrey at center and Joe Thuney and Trey Smith flanking him. Joe Thuney's out on the left side, and that's a huge problem because now Mahomes is going to have to deal with interior pressure because you could count on Thuney to win his matchup one-on-one, and teams don't attack him because he's that good in pass pro. Now they're going to really test, I'm learning his backup's name for the first time, Nick Allegretti, who is a 28-year-old backup, 2019 draft year, 7th rounder, has played 89 snaps, 85 of them on field goal, and 4 of them in line. So he is a career special teamer, and that's who's going to be tasked with dealing with Justin Madubuike, which is not good at all for the Kansas City Chiefs. And that's on top of the fact that you just have to accept the fact that Kyle Van Noy and Jadeveon Clowney are going to beat Donovan Smith and Jawan Taylor every single time. And Clowney is going to set the edge in the rush game every single down. And you just have to deal with that aspect of it. And missing Thuney hurts in the run game as well because Isaiah Pacheco should be able to run fairly well because they use more, the Chiefs employ more gap scheme than they do zone scheme. And the Ravens gap scheme, the Ravens they're not weak against gap scheme runs, but they're easier to run on gap scheme wise, and they'll let you have gap scheme runs more than they'll let you have explosive zone runs where you hit the edge and go. Obviously, they'll game plan for their opponent, but just as a general base, that's what they had. And I think Pacheco, with Thuney in there, that's just a much more comfortable lineup. It's a much more comfortable situation where you can run either side very comfortably. Now you can't. Now you have to basically exclusively run behind Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, which are worse fates. But that makes, again, Justin Madubuike and Michael Pierce and Travis Jones, all of these guys in the middle that they rotate in and out, it makes their lives a lot easier knowing that you're dealing with a career special teamer at left guard as opposed to one of the best in the NFL. And so that trench warfare matchup is entirely in the Ravens' favor. Just their depth, their skill at that position, and all that. So now they have to win at the skill positions, which when you have Mahomes, you have a chance, right? And Pacheco, I was mentioning him, he's great. I do think the Ravens have the linebackers and just built through the middle defense to deal with him, with Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith patrolling the middle, Kyle Hamilton coming down, making plays in the run game. Geno Stone and Marcus Williams are also not bad themselves, and Ronald Darby and Brandon Stephens do tackle in the run game. So it's not going to be easy for Pacheco, but he runs angry, he runs hard, he does not go backwards, and that's massive. So I think that Pacheco is a difference maker in the run game. Kelce obviously is Kelce. He's one of the best receiving tight ends to do it. I do think that having Kyle Hamilton, he could get erased from this game, and that might be their game plan, is to use Kyle Hamilton to erase Travis Kelce from passing downs and then force Rashee Rice to win. And Rashee Rice has actually been awesome. People talk about how bad the receivers are, but he is a rookie at SMU, and he's just a baller, right? There's no denying that. Justin Watson is good for a big catch or two a game. He's not great, but he's definitely not bad, right? There's worse receivers than Justin Watson in this NFL. There are not many worse receivers than Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Kadarius Toney, so I could see the Ravens trying to funnel balls to Marcus Valdes-Scantling as you have to go here, you have to go to Justin Watson down after down after down, and they have to beat us, as opposed to Rashee Rice, Travis Kelce, and Pacheco. And considering that this defense was able to sort of manhandle the 49ers, right? The 49ers were not able to do what they want to do, but I think that has to do with Brock Purdy facing defenses that make things difficult as opposed to the actual roster talent that was being deployed. And obviously Mahomes will make the right decisions. He will make the right plays. And as long as that interior pressure is not there, he gives them a fighting chance. I do think that the line is too close, for my opinion, to bet any, like, basically once you get out of 4, right? I think if you're betting between 3 and 4, you just take the money line or you take the cover. Like, if you believe in the Chiefs to cover 3.5, you should just take them money line. And if you believe in the Ravens, obviously you don't take the money line, you take them to cover, because that's a, field goal possession game. So that's what the Chiefs have to do offensively, and I talked about what the Ravens have to do defensively, and just how they sort of have to just play their game and don't let any explosives happen. And considering that this is the first healthy defense the Chiefs will have been facing since, like, the Raiders, there's a good chance that they're sort of shell-shocked out the gate with how well the defense is playing. And yeah, so I'm thinking Ravens defense definitely has an advantage over the Chiefs offense, especially with Tooney. Like, I'm not even kidding. If Tooney were in and you were able to confidently run and confidently say that the interior pressure wasn't going to be there, like, that's a much different story. But you do have interior pressure. You do have Justin Madubuike, who's been wreaking havoc on guards and centers all year. Like, that's going to matter, because now, what if Nick Allegretti is not familiar with how to pick up stunts? What if Nick Allegretti can't handle that sort of thing? And all of a sudden, Creed Humphrey has to help him out in double teams, and then Donovan Smith's on an island, Jawan Taylor's on an island, Trey Smith's on an island. So now you have, and Trey Smith he's a much better run blocker than he's pass blocker. He's still a good pass blocker, but you just don't have that same level of consistency. So that's what I'm really thinking in terms of the offense versus the defense, and I'll flip that around. And again, going to be talking a lot of Ravens. So the Ravens do line up in 3 wide receiver sets, but they don't line up in 3 wide receiver sets all the time. You're going to see a lot more of 21, which is 2 running backs with the fullback, Patrick Ricard, and 12 personnel with 2 tight ends. So there'd be Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews, because Mark Andrews is back, and that makes a huge difference. And just in terms of talking, let's go with 21 personnel, right? I think that's what we're going to see a lot of. I think with the Chiefs, we're going to see... So there's a huge thing with the Chiefs right now, right? Where you've got... Like, it's weird, right? So the Chiefs are going to be missing Willie Gay, which is potentially, like, he's listed as questionable. Like, he's not a guarantee to play, and if he does play, he'll be a little gimpy. That's massive, because he's the only backer they have with the speed that can, like, basically be an effective QB spy on Lamar, because Nick Bolton and Leo Chenal can't really do that. And then obviously Chris Jones is the monster. Chris Jones, you line him up, you move him around the line, you do whatever you can to create a mismatch, right? But in this case, I'd say the mismatch is over the left guard for the Ravens, John Simpson. He's not great. Could definitely be better. He's helped out a ton by the fact that he plays in between Ronnie Stanley. Ronnie Stanley's had his, like, in terms of injury and stuff, like, he's obviously been injured. He's not quite been himself, his peak form. But I do think that, considering this is one of his worst years and he's still very much a good tackle, he's not a guarantee to just, like, lose over and over again to Chris Jones. Morgan Moses has also been great at tackle. He's just a really good ball player, having some of his best football. And then the interior offensive line are the stars of the show, with Kevin Zeitler being just a beast at right guard, great in the run game, and Tyler Linderbaum, who's him and Creed Humphrey. This is just like centers being awesome at football, and like the modern center in general being really, really cool and good. So really excited to like see all of that in action. So now we got to take a look at the secondary. So I do think we might actually see base. I don't know how confident, and to be frank, I'm not sure how confident. I'm not sure just how good Justin Reed is in the run game. Like, he could be all right. I know he's been in the league a long time. I know that he's been a solid player. He's been not so good these past few years, but I know L'Jarius Sneed is a dog in the run game. He's just one of the best tackles and one of the best corners in general. Trent McDuffie's a really great slot corner. He makes plays in the run game as well. And then Joshua Williams sort of been really solid player for themselves in his second year. So Their corners are fine, right? Their outside is fine. Chris Jones is obviously fantastic. George Karlaftis is he's not what you could honestly say he's not what you hoped for so far at a first round edge pick. And then you have Charles Omenihu, who has just been really good depth his entire career. Definitely not a bad player whatsoever. So you have solid edges. I think that the tackles are better than the edges in this case, like what we're seeing. I think Chris Jones is sort of the great equalizer because wherever you put him, he's going to have the advantage, except maybe directly over Tyler Linderbaum. And I do think that the corners are better than the receivers in this case. I think L'Jarius Sneed, Trent McDuffie, and Joshua Williams is a better matchup for Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers, and Odell Beckham. Like, I think that the corners have the advantage. And I think where the Ravens have the edge is in the run game. So you have Gus Edwards, who can, like, the Chiefs' run defense is not particularly good. That's because their linebackers are not particularly good. And even though Willie Gay has been on the field and has made plays in the past, he's not had a great season in coverage or in the run game. Nick Bolton has sort of regressed from his outstanding rookie year, sort of year over year. I think that could be wear and tear because the Chiefs always play a ton of football. And just over the middle, they're not fantastic. Like, Mike Edwards is not great. Obviously, he was fantastic in Tampa back in 2020, but that year sort of nominally. I was mentioning Justin Reed as well. Just not great in coverage. He's a better run defender than he is a coverage defender, which is not what you want out of your strong safety, just in general. So I'm thinking the Ravens will be able to run the ball. They run the ball on everybody no matter what to begin with. And I think that with the Chiefs' run defense being as poor as it is, and they design it that way, they don't want big plays. They want you to run the ball, and almost punch yourself out, right? That's what their goal is. They want you to punch yourself out. And if you can, like if in their case, when you punch yourself out, it's like, oh, okay, like now you're tired. Now you're not going to get drives. Our offense is going to hold the ball at the end of the game, which is a fine strategy. It is. But I do think that the Ravens will be able to hold the ball for as long as they want, just because that's what they do. You know, they tend to be better at it than everybody else, holding the ball, running the ball, and they do it creative ways. And the biggest X factor, in my opinion, isn't really going to be the running game, because we know that Ricard Edwards and Lamar himself and Justice Hill are going to get theirs, with Ricard leading the way at fullback. It's when they deploy their 12 personnel, the 2 tight end sets, right? With Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews, because Andrews is back, and he's fantastic. Everybody knows that he's an amazing, amazing tight end. One of the best in football. Probably the second. It depends on how you feel about Kittle. I think Kittle's definitely the best tight end in football. And Andrews, when healthy, I think he's not the blocker Kittle is, but he's a better blocker than Kelsey, and this year he was a better receiver than Kelsey, so he's coming back from injury. He might be a little rusty, but the threat of him, combined with Isaiah Likely, will really test that middle of the field, because you can't really dedicate, like, that's the math of the Ravens offense is fascinating, and I love seeing it. I love watching it. I love the math of it. It's so fun, because Lamar forces you to account for somebody. Like, he has to be accounted for in the pass game in a unique way. He has to be spied, obviously, because of his threat to run. And then, so that you have one defender already dedicated. Then you have to have at least coverage across the board. Andrews, in some cases, demands a double team. And Zay Flowers is very twitchy. He's very get the ball in his hands. He's able to shake guys with his just raw agility. His route running isn't perfect, but like I said, that raw agility is there. Justice Hill has to be accounted for out of the backfield. Andrews obviously might require double coverage. And then Rashad Bateman is a decent one-on-one receiver, and he's able to sit in his zone and get open and do really like standard wide receiver things. So you've got all that going in favor of the Ravens offense against a defense that frankly can't really stop the run against the number 1 rushing attack in the NFL. And then the passing game math is fascinating, and they might not even have to, like, they could win this game with Lamar throwing under 200 yards if it's the right 200 yards. And I think that has a real shot of happening. And like I've been saying all year with the Ravens, I put I've invested in them, we could say. I think the Ravens are just a better football team at this point in time than the Kansas City Chiefs. I would be thinking this would be a lot closer if Joe Thuney were playing. Obviously, former Patriot, I was a huge fanboy. I'm an offensive line fanboy in general. I love the positions. I love the work those guys do. I think it's my favorite position group to watch, just in general. I love offensive line play and how teams are built around the offensive line in some cases. And I really like what the Chiefs did because they know they can survive poor tackle play because of the way Mahomes operates. They cannot survive interior pressure with the poor tackle play because that's what led to the 2020 Super Bowl, where it was just a complete disaster. And with that being the case, I really do think that the Chiefs are going to lose here. I think the Ravens do win this game. I think the Ravens are going to cover as well if you're interested in betting that, which I will be. I just think that the math of the Ravens offense is impossible to defend. And as much as Steve Spagnuolo is a genius defensive coordinator, it's hard to really fool guys who've been in the league as long as Lamar Jackson. Like, his specialty is taking someone who hasn't really seen it all and making their wheels spin. And just like making them think too much. Lamar thinking means he's going to scramble around for 5, 6, 7 seconds and just make your defense exhausted. And that's the last thing the Chiefs really want with a defense that really also can't defend the run that well. The way I can see this happening is a Chris Jones wrecking crew sort of game. Like, he just overcomes everything and just single-handedly changes the outcome of the game. I do think that the Ravens defense is going to make the Chiefs offense earn every single yard. And I think that we've seen the Chiefs offense be poor, not execute, and not be great. And people would blame on Kadarius Toney. Oh, the receivers are so bad. We saw the Raiders just mangle them not that long ago. And it's sort of been dismissed just because they beat up on the Chiefs in recent weeks have beat on two very unhealthy defenses. That Raiders defense is a great unit. It is nowhere close to as good as the Ravens unit. And I think that we're going to see the Ravens sort of take care of business at home, do their thing, and punch a ticket to the Super Bowl for the first time in about a decade. So that's what I've got going on in the AFC title game. Going to kick it over to the later game, where we have the Detroit Lions hosting the 49ers. I'm going to do the same thing. Going to talk about what teams can do offensively and defensively to win this game. And we were going to flip over, take a look at the Lions offense. The Lions offense runs out of 2 tight end sets and 1 tight end sets most of the time. So we've got, typically on the field, you're going to see Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Josh Reynolds, some combination of those three, most of the time all three of them, along with Sam Laporta at tight end, Brock Ryder, Anthony Frisker as the secondary tight end, Jared Goff obviously at quarterback, and David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs on the running backs. So we've got a fantastic offensive line. Just one of the best in football, probably the best in football. Going up against one of the, I'd say the single best pass rushing unit in football. And again, just PFF is just like, oh, what if everything was base? No one runs 4-3-3 anymore. So we're going to see, I still can't believe, I just need to say this, Logan Ryan is playing strong safety for the 49ers because Talanoa Hufunga's hurt. So you've got Logan Ryan on the back end, who I love, right? I love Logan Ryan. He is not an NFL. I mean, it's good he's playing strong safety instead of corner, considering his age. But that dude is not. It's crazy he's playing. So talking about that, we've got, I know Jonah Jackson, the left guard. I think he's going to be out. So it's going to be the backup, Coyote Awosika, who, had a great 2021. Has played snaps before, but hasn't really played that much because Jonah Jackson's gotten more run. But because he had a really good 2021, I think he'll be able to play some passing snaps, rushing snaps. He'll be okay because he's in between Taylor Decker and Frank Ragnow. Obviously, fantastic left tackle, the best center in football for this year. I think Linderbaum is probably going to take that title sooner rather than later. But you've got Frank Ragnow, Graham Glasgow, and Penei Sewell, who Sewell's amazing, just a fantastic tackle. And so you have this amazing offensive line. Jared Goff is playing great quarterback. I think, obviously, he's not great with pressure. He's been better with pressure this year than he has any other year of his career. But I do think that his susceptibility to pressure is important because Chase Young, Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, Javon Hargrave, that's a NASCAR front. That is an old school, we're going to get after you front. That is hard to face, obviously. Their speed, their power, their everything is great. Obviously, they're focused on speed. They're not as big. And that makes them able to be run on, which is important because that's what the Lions want to do. They want to run the ball. We saw Aaron Jones and the Packers have great success running the ball, and the Lions are better at running the ball than the Packers. So you've got Jared Goff, one of the best years of his career, balling out. Amon-Ra St. Brown, monster in the slot. So Amon-Ra St. Brown is a very fascinating player because I think he's like the final evolution. I say this, but he feels like the final evolution of the slot receiver, where you have Welker, right? Welker is like the prototypical slot receiver. He's small, scrappy, willing to get hit over the middle over and over and over again. Amon-Ra runs the exact same route tree as him, but he's 6'1" and over 200 pounds. That matters. So he plays the slot, he takes hits, he takes a beating, but he has the size to just keep it up. And that's massive. He's amazing. He's amazing at it. He runs the exact same route tree. It's really fascinating. So he's going to have an advantage over the corners. I know Ambry Thomas is sort of like the pick on corner, right? The San Francisco 49ers, their front six, right? Their Chase Young is also just like, he's great. He's a pretty great pass rusher. He is not a good run defender. But Javon Hargrave, like that's where I'm getting. It's like, and same with Javon Hargrave. It's like Eric Armstead is, again, like these guys are. Bosa, I know, does both excellently because that's what he does. Nick Bosa's a monster. But Armstead, Hargrave, and Young are fantastic pass rushers. Their rush defense is not very great. They want to get downhill. They attack downhill. They don't maintain their gap integrity very well, and they just hope for Ed Warner and Dre Greenlaw, and in the past, Talanoa Hufanga, just clean up for them. And they can get away with that against bad teams that don't have the ability to counterpunch them. But I think the Lions do have the ability to counterpunch them. Because Josh Reynolds is a great player, Sam Laporta is a great player, Amon-Ra is a great player, Gibbs and Montgomery are great, and the offensive line is going to beat up on the defensive line in the run game, and I think that's what the Lions are going to look to do. They're going to look for ball control. They're going to look to keep the 49ers off the field, right? Because obviously you want those weapons off the field as long as possible. I think you don't attack Charvarius Ward because Charvarius Ward is very good. You're going to want to attack Ambry Thomas, find him one-on-one, try to get Josh Reynolds on him on one-on-one, try to get Jameson Williams on him one-on-one, and potentially Amon-Ra. Like, I think Yaminer Lenoir is just going to shadow him, Amon-Ra, everywhere because he's a great slot corner, but I do think that Lenoir giving up the size advantage by a full 3 inches is going to matter. Tayshaun Gibson has been in the league a long time and is a solid center fielder type free safety. I think that he'll have a great impact, I think, on the game. Just because he'll have to ball hawk, he'll probably have to just play center field and make sure Jameson Williams isn't killing them over the top. I think Sam Laporta is going to have seam shots in between Dre Greenlaw and Logan Ryan. So I think this offense is going to be able to function. I think Montgomery and Gibbs are going to be able to run the ball. Because, again, we saw with Aaron Jones, I think Ben Johnson's going to really draw it up. And I think the Lions are going to be able to score on this defense. I do think that they need to make sure that they keep Jared upright, because if Nick Bosa and Armstead and Hargrave get cooking and Young gets involved in the mix, it's like then it's going to be a tough day, because they can get home with 4. They will get home a few times, and they just have to minimize that damage. So that's what I'm thinking in terms of the offense versus the defense. I do think the Lions are going to score a lot of points. And now we get to talk about the 49ers, which I've said my thing about Brock Purdy, where I think Brock Purdy is a good quarterback. I do. I truly do. He should never have been picked Mr. Relevant, even just from watching him. There's such a disconnect, I think, between college scouts and NFL scouts, or not even college scouts, but people who watch college football versus NFL scouts. Obviously, his big issue is that he's 6'1". He does make good throws. He's able to play on schedule. All that good stuff. He was able to really take advantage of some weak matchups with Jawan Jennings, not Jawan Wennings. He was able to take advantage of Jawan Jennings having good matchups, right? So the Lions' defense is obviously not good. It just isn't. Aiden Hutchinson's good. He's a good player. They have a much better nickel base, and nickel again is the base. It's a front 6 more than a front 7. But yeah, I just think that like Kindle Vildor, Cam Sutton, Brian Branch is great. So they've got really good individual players at each level. Like Alex Anzalone's awesome, Aiden Hutchinson and Aleem McNeil are awesome, and then Ifeatu Melifonwu and C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Brian Branch are good players, but they're just not. I think they're going to be scored on quite a bit. The one thing that they can do to try and win this game, I think, is they have to get really creative with their stunts and their games they play up front with their defensive line, because Trent Williams, aside from Trent Williams, their offensive line is not good. PFF has John Feliciano having a fantastic year. It's hard for me to believe that because he's never been good before, so I think it's more of a scheme thing as opposed to a... I think the scheme is making him look better than he actually looks. Because Colton McKivitz, John Feliciano, Jake Brendel, and Aaron Banks, they are not good linemen. Trent Williams is fantastic. Penei Sewell took the torch from him, right? So that's how good he is. It sort of goes without saying. Obviously, Purdy's been good. He can make good throws. I don't trust him against defenses that can put him off schedule, and I don't necessarily think the Lions are going to be able to do that unless they're able to bring creative pressure and spin the wheels. And the amount of and Purdy's just different without Deebo Samuel, because Deebo changes the math in the way that the Ravens can change the math, right? Deebo changes the math because of how unique of a weapon he is. You can't just treat him like a wide receiver. You have to treat him as a unique weapon, right? There's no one quite like him in the NFL. So when he's off the field, you can play a more straight-up traditional defense and do traditional defense things, which can be a much better thing for most units, because most units are not as adaptable as like a Ravens or Patriots or Jets, right? So I think that's what we're going to see. I do think McCaffrey's going to have a great game because this Lions team can be run on. Kittle should have a great game. I know that Melifonwu will probably be able to contain him up the seam a little bit. Ayuk should have a great game. Like this should be a points game. And frankly, while rooting for the Lions is super fun, it's a great story. I think the Lions are going to lose this game, but I think they can cover. I really do. So it opened at 7. It's still at 7. I think they can cover. I love the over at 51. It opened at 52. I think it's down to 51.5 now. Love that over. I think that if you're going to bet a cover, bet the Lions to cover, just because I don't trust the 49ers defensive back end very much at all. And I think I think we can see a lot of points in this game. I really do. So I'm thinking we get a rematch of Christmas Day, and hopefully that's the case. So yeah, thank you for listening to a more detailed analysis of this. If this is something you'd like to see more of, some individual football matchups, and maybe even go through some games, just in general, or teams, and what I think they can do to improve in the offseason, heading into the free agency, draft needs, I might do a series on that at some point, just for fun. Obviously, it's not as gambling related, but it could be draft related. Odds are he's going to be first overall pick, your draft order, all that sort of thing. Certain guys to certain teams, which I'm sure you'll be able to bet on. So hopefully that's the case. And with all this being said, thank you for listening, everybody. Going to have one more football podcast. And then I'm going to be changing up the format a little bit. Going to be doing like daily bet reviews, shorter pods, that sort of thing. So thank you for listening, as always, and peace.